shall overcome one day, them say. Well, too long, we're waiting for that day. We shall overcome one day, them say.
My name is Stephanie Leach, and I'm the founding director of Womantra, which is a Trinidad and Tobago based feminist organization. One of our flagship projects, Silent Silhouettes, is an art installation that captures femicide statistics, and it's what we'll be talking more about today. I would have first been introduced to gender studies as an undergraduate student at the University of the West Indies. A friend just casually mentioned it to me, and I thought, why not? Little did I know I would be embarking on a lifelong journey of feminist activism. Well, femicide refers to gender-based violence-related deaths specifically. So it's a very specific category of murder of women and of girls. And gender-based violence is more of a broad, or what we call an umbrella term, that kind of encapsulates many types of violence, but the underlying thread being that these types of violence are perpetrated against people because of their gender identity. Gender-based violence affects everyone, particularly in the Caribbean region where we have a high rate of gender-based violence. So according to a recent UN Women and IDB prevalence study, we know that 1 in 3 women will experience gender-based violence in their life, and that's probably still a low statistic. And women don't exist in isolation. They are mothers, sisters, friends, they have families and children. And so domestic violence or gender-based violence affects everyone. Well, I think that for people that experience gender-based violence, it can be quite isolating. And so a lot of people don't know where to turn to get justice, whatever that looks like for them. And we know that in Trinidad and Tobago, specifically, the statistic is as low as 5% of women report to the police. So we see that that's a very serious gap, and that, you know, what we can glean is that people don't necessarily trust that the police will serve justice to them, and have failed to a large extent in protecting them. I would also say that seeking legal redress can be a very difficult to try to pursue in pursuit of justice, because we know that the legal system is very bureaucratic, and it's particularly hard for poor women who can't afford expensive criminal attorneys and who just don't want to be dragged through the court system. You know, it's very difficult to be a victim of a violent crime and then to have to relive that situation over and over again. Well, the issue of witnesses is very important, because oftentimes, you know, we hear and we see violence and we don't say anything. And even the law recognizes this as a problem and a gap. And so for children in particular, there's what we call mandatory reporting, which makes it mandatory for certain classes of adults to report violence that they've seen. So that's any person responsible for a child, so a parent, a teacher, or anybody with care responsibilities, including state facilities. But this is also applicable for adults. So once you see something, you should say something. Part of what we've been trying to do at Womantra is to make legal justice more accessible to women through establishing a legal clinic. So it will be free for women to access legal consultations from a team of attorneys, as well as representation once they meet a certain criteria. So this is just our small contribution to make it easier for women who've been through a traumatic experience.
Increase effectiveness, accountability, and transparency of state mechanisms.
Ensure sufficient financial support and resources are made available to organizations providing services to survivors and victims.
Establish a social fund as a national budgetary priority to support psychosocial services and other interventions.
Invest in social reformation programs to facilitate cultural change towards nonviolence.
Create a coordination mechanism that facilitates feedback from civil society, academics, and ministries, all working together to end gender-based violence.
Well, Silent Silhouettes is quite a unique contribution to the landscape of gender-based violence because it specifically looks at femicide. And it's very interesting whenever we have the installation, which is a moving installation that is displayed in various locations during 16 days of activism, is the public's interaction with it. So people will walk by, they'll obviously be curious by seeing all of these silhouettes. And the silhouettes typically have a badge with some information about the woman. And you see people really connecting with that. They might remember this story from the newspaper, or they might be related to the victim. And they take their time going through the installation, reading all of the stories, and a lot of the women actually ask for literature, for brochures, and how they can get help. So I think it's an important place for us to memorialize these women who are often forgotten or sensationalized by the media, but also a unique time to have public awareness raising around GBV and what the resources are that can help them.
You took my mother, you took my daughter, you took my sister, you took my friend.
Take a stand for those who no longer can.
Men must take a stand against violence against women. Change men's perception of women.
I did not help. I stood by and did nothing. I did not want to get involved in domestic business. You were killed.
Value me as I value you. Who gave you a license to take me out?
This year in particular, we've seen the introductions of many different types of ways that people can access services. And so there's been the establishment of the website and the app by the TTPS where people can report online. Also, there are a number of NGOs that offer direct services to victims of gender-based violence. And that would include places like the Coalition Against Domestic Violence and Rape Crisis Center of Trinidad and Tobago that offer free counseling, as well as Groots TNT, which offers counseling and shelter and is inclusive of LGBT persons. Well, I think the first thing to acknowledge is that anyone can be a perpetrator of violence, even if you are yourself a victim. Secondary abuse is quite common in relationships that are defined by violence. I would also say that there's a wealth of knowledge online. There are a number of checklists that you can reference as to what might indicate that you have abusive traits or behaviors. In fact, Womantra, through this project, will be publishing a guide which includes that information for both perpetrators and victims based on our law. So it would indicate what are the specific types of behaviors that would constitute abuse. Well, a lot of the gender-based violence response work is done by non-governmental organizations who are not subsidized by the government and are still expected to provide services for victims of gender-based violence, which we know is a very high volume of people. And so it is very easy for people to become involved because, a lot of these organizations require the labor and support of volunteers. So I would encourage anybody who's interested in getting involved to reach out to any of the organizations that offer that kind of support, including CADV, Rape Crisis Center, Groots, Womantra, or OABI. There are many others, and so I would encourage everyone to get involved.
We will not forget. We will not be silenced.
We shall overcome one day, them say. Well, too long too long. We're waiting for that day. We shall overcome one day, them say. Well, too long, we're waiting for the day. Well, today is the day. Today is the day for justice. Today is the day. Today be the day for justice.